Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This file is being recorded for the January 2024 edition of Socialism for All. Had to think about that for a second. And it's a biography of UK Marxist-Leninist Bill Bland by Hari Kumar. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe and consider supporting on Patreon or buy me a coffee at patreon.com/socialismforall or buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. There are links to Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee in the video description. So here at Socialism for All, we closed out 2023 with some readings that ended up on our Sino-Soviet split playlist, including a number of them from Enver Hoxha of Albania. And we started out 2024 with another great, in my opinion, Hoxha text, The Marxist-Leninist Movement and the World Crisis of Capitalism. In that piece, Hoxha touches upon the subject of terrorism and how it is not a Marxist-Leninist tactic. That's not a new take by Hoxha, that's something that goes back to Lenin in Lenin's criticisms of the Narodnik or populist movement in Russia in the early 20th century. Marxist-Leninists do believe in revolutionary struggle, however, terrorism is not mass action. And as Hoxha pointed out, in the current era, it's most often used by imperialism to confuse, mislead, and terrorize the working class, and as a basis for the setting up of a fascist police state. Hoxha used the examples that would come to be known in Europe as Operation Gladio. We have a video about that on the channel. Gladio was the code name for a stay-behind network of leftover fascists from World War II who were brought into NATO intelligence service to be deployed in the event of proletarian revolutions in Western Europe or Soviet invasion or whatever that far-right fascists would be useful in fighting against. Except they didn't do it as the right wing. They would in fact pretend to be communist groups, and this was again part of the misdirection of the masses and the smearing of the actual resistance. I think that in more recent times it's not a huge stretch to apply the same analysis to 9/11, the Patriot Act, etc. Anyone who was at all conscious during the 2000s can remember the entire discussion, in not just the US but other countries as well, was dominated by terrorism as the pretext for a complete overhaul and extra rollout of an enhanced surveillance state. So the next text that we're going to read is On Terrorism by Bill Bland from 1975. Before we read that text, I wanted to introduce you to Bill Bland. You may not know who this author is, and it's the first reading that we've done of his. We'll get to his bio in just a second. First, I just want to show you what other upcoming readings we have planned for early 2024. These are about half of them, and I will update the list as we get through this one. Basically, these are a lot of texts that are referenced in ones that we've done recently or are about to do that we haven't done yet, and I thought it would be a good time to just roll these out. Once we get through with this list and the following one of just sort of cleanup readings, I plan to get back into the basic Marxism-Leninism study guide playlist. That includes the final third of Engels' Anti-Dühring, as well as Capital, and Lenin's Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. We started that playlist about 4 years ago, and I thought it was time that we finish it. I also have some other texts we'll be tying in with those readings. Alright, so enough of that. Let's get into the biography of William Bill Bland. This was posted at the Marxists Internet Archive, marxists.org. Thanks as usual to MIA for hosting this and thousands of other free Marxist texts. And this biography was written by Hari Kumar, who also has work published at outlets such as Marxist-Leninist Currents, a theoretical journal of the American Party of Labor. Let's begin. Bill Bland, who lived 1916 to 2001, was born in the north of England into a middle-class home. He spent his politically formative years in the Army of New Zealand, where he was active in the Communist Party as an educator. He returned to Britain in the post-war years as an ophthalmic optician. In the 1950s, Bland witnessed the Communist Party of Great Britain embracing the, quote, peaceful road to socialism, and Khrushchev's denunciation of Stalin. Bland believed these revisionist stances were incorrect and anti-Marxist-Leninist. Bland therefore became a member of several anti-revisionist formations in Britain. He soon joined forces with Mike Baker in the Marxist-Leninist Organization of Britain, MLOB. Shortly thereafter, the Cultural Revolution occurred in China, and prompted by a barrage of questions, Bland undertook a systematic study of Mao. He found that he could not agree with Mao's theory of the new democratic state, and penned within months the first refutation of Mao from the point of view of a pro-Stalin supporter. At that time, the MLOB rapidly dwindled in size as many members retained affection for Mao. This was to be the first of Bland's many unpopular analyses in the pro-Stalin wing of the communist movement. Bland spent the rest of his life trying to answer the question, comment which I know a lot of you in the audience also have, how had revisionism become ascendant? Bland came to the conclusion that Stalin had been in a minority position in the Politburo, surrounded by hidden revisionists too clever to openly attack Marxism-Leninism. Further, they had straitjacketed Stalin by means of erecting the cult of personality, which was then used as a weapon against him. Bland felt that Yezhov had subverted the secret services, who had been replaced at Stalin's behest by Beria. Bland pointed, for example, to the release of many thousands of wrongly imprisoned Bolsheviks. Bland then argued that by the 18th Party Congress, Stalin had been excluded from the highest echelons of the party decision-making apparatus and had counterattacked with his pamphlet, Economic Problems of the USSR. Stalin's essay was a seminal attack on Nikolai Voznesensky, who was linked to Khrushchev. Consequently, argued Bland, the later economic changes re-establishing capitalism in the USSR had been fought to a standstill by Stalin. Bland therefore argued a special significance for Stalin's last work. As Bland saw it, once Stalin was dead, the capitalist, quote, reforms of Voznesensky were enacted by Khrushchev and his successors. He formulated these views in articles that culminated in the book The Restoration of Capitalism in the USSR, published in 1981. Following his analysis of Maoism as left revisionism, Bland began to question his own long-standing support for the pro-Chinese Party of Labor of Albania. Comment, remember that in the Sino-Soviet split, Albania took the side of China, but concluded that the People's Socialist Republic of Albania remained socialist. Before the 20th Party Congress of the CPSU, Bland had founded the Albanian Society of Britain, at the invitation of the People's Socialist Republic of Albania. Despite now being officially ostracized by Albania, Bland continued his work running the Albanian Society and organizing an enormous education on this isolated, solitary socialist country. In those years, he became an acknowledged authority on all things Albanian. He published an English-Albanian dictionary, and he fielded any number of queries upon arcane features of Albanian life, history, music, foods, geography, customs and mores, etc. While China was supported by the Albanian Party, some of the Maoist parties had run an explicit party front, Albania Society, resisting Bland's call for one single, united front Albania Society, regardless of, quote, narrow party affiliation. Following Enver Hoxha's open attack on Mao, comment this was the Sino-Albanian split, some of these societies split and some died. Their remaining members were correctly advised by the Foreign Liaison Committee of the People's Socialist Republic of Albania to join with Bland's organization to form one united front of support for the PSRA. But they launched attempts to remove Bland's leadership, charging that an emphasis on all aspects of life, such as music, etc., was, quote, anti-Marxist-Leninist, and, quote, insufficiently political, and that Bland should be removed. The membership rejected this attempt to remove Bland. The society continued until the revisionist takeover of the People's Socialist Republic of Albania by Ramiz Alia, at which point Bland resigned from the Albania Society. It was primarily differences over Bland's analysis of Albania as socialist that precipitated the split in the MLOB in 1975, following which the Communist League came into existence. The Communist League, from its inception, always supported the People's Socialist Republic of Albania as a solitary socialist state. Those that stayed with the MLOB, including Mike Baker and his supporters, rejected that position. One specific aspect of modern revisionism, to which Bland paid close attention, was the subversion of the second stage of socialist revolution into static, national democratic deviations. For Bland, this represented a distortion from the Marxist-Leninist theory of the nation. Into these categories, Bland placed the pseudo-socialist revolutions of China, Cuba, North Korea, Vietnam, and Tanzania. He argued that all of these had ignored Lenin's injunction not to build a, quote, Chinese wall between the first, or national democratic stage of revolution, and the second, socialist stage. Bland also argued that other phenomena such as the black nation in the USA, quote, black racism, and, quote, Scottish, Welsh, and Cornish nationalism in Britain, represented national deviations away from socialist revolution. These views led him to challenge fundamental Stalinist premises. If the Soviet Union had been permeated by a class war involving the highest echelons of the party, was the Comintern, or Communist International, any different? Bland puzzled over several related matters. Why had the Comintern performed so many about-faces on key questions, such as the nature of the United Front? Was Stalin really in control of the Comintern? Why had the People's Front governments been supported beyond any credible point by European communist parties, especially in France, in assisting a fascist takeover? And why did the ultra-left rejections of a united front of the late 1920s swing suddenly into ultra-right distortions of a correct united front policy, etc.? Bland argued that the first ultra-left deviations in the Comintern, in the period from about 1924 to 1928, had allowed fascism to take power in Germany. In the same period, under the cover of this ultra-leftism, Menwilski and Kusinin had destroyed the Indian Revolution by sabotaging Stalin's line of the workers' and peasants' parties. Bland thought that the second right deviations from about 1930 onwards had prevented the masses of Europe taking power under Communist Party direction. So just a comment here for people who are not real familiar with the ins and outs of this time. The earlier policy was that the social democratic reformist parties were social fascists, that is, socialist in name, but fascist in practice. Fascism was new at that time, however, this principle has been borne out many times, and is currently known in the slogan, "Scratch a liberal and a fascist bleeds." However, later, in perhaps an overcorrection, or perhaps there were other things going on, there was more of a right deviation approaching opportunism, in which these same parties now needed to be embraced as partners. There are some seemingly good reasons, perhaps, for some of that change in policy, but did it actually result in a new erroneous direction? Continuing, Bland now further argued that Stalin had not been in a leadership position in the Comintern since around 1924, as follows. Initially, Zinoviev had exercised the leadership, and thereafter, Bukharin. When both were exposed as revisionists, they were purged from further influencing the Comintern. Both were later shot. Thereafter, Dimitrov, Otto Kusinin, and Dmitry Menwilski exercised the Comintern leadership. Bland argued that they had perverted a correct implementation of Marxism-Leninism. Dimitrov had been sprung from German fascist prisons thanks to a rather dubious and surprising, quote, leniency of the German fascists. Why? Asked Bland, replying that a pact had been struck, as shown when Dimitrov went on to subvert United Front tactics into the right deviation of supporting Popular Front governments, beyond Marxist-Leninist principles of the correct United Front tactics. Comment, the difference between a United Front and a Popular Front is that a United Front combines proletarian parties, which may not be Marxist-Leninist, while a Popular Front includes non-proletarian parties. So why would you do that? Why would you include non-proletarian parties in your alliance? Well, the main justifiable reason to do that is if, due to a lack of sufficient capitalist development, the proletarian class would not be large or advanced enough in a particular country to be strong enough to stand on its own. So you would look for elements of the petty bourgeoisie that might be anti-fascist, maybe even of the national bourgeoisie. However, we know that these elements are vacillating, so the proletariat would always try to be in the lead. And of course, in the countries where the proletariat was larger, more developed, more theoretically advanced, and politically experienced, you would not need to do that, hence the United Front would be the correct tactic. But again, this wasn't exactly followed, and the question of revolution in Western Europe, particularly in more advanced countries like France, for example, in the wake of World War II, was more or less forgotten, or at least overlooked and neglected in favor of this more purely defensive Popular Front alliance. So continuing, it was for these reasons, argued Bland, that the Comintern was dissolved by Stalin. Stalin then created the Cominform under a completely different leadership, led by his most trusted lieutenants, such as Zhdanov. It must be remembered, said Bland, that it was the Cominform that had exposed the Western Communist Party's plans for implementing right deviationist policies, and the Titoites for allying with the USA. During this latter historic confrontation, Stalin overtly supported Albania and Hoxha against Tito. Apart from his theoretical works, Bland wrote a number of plays, directed 2 films, and created a ballet. A lifelong, intense love of the arts, especially cinema and the theater, led him to reaffirm the principles of socialist realist art. He wrote widely on theater and film, and on the history of theater. In Britain, he led the Communist League to urge the principled unity of all Marxist-Leninist forces, hence Bland's role in the early stages of the National Committee for a Marxist-Leninist Unity, NCMLU. Bland also formed the Stalin Society in the UK, but the pro-China factions within the Stalin Society ensured Bland's later expulsion. He was a key figure in the formation of the International Struggle Marxist-Leninist and was cited as a major influence by Alliance Marxist-Leninist North America. And there you have it, that's the biography of Bill Bland by Hari Kumar. As Marxist-Leninists, we need to keep one foot in understanding and solving the problems of today, while also taking a look at answering some of the unanswered or insufficiently analyzed historical problems of the history of the international communist movement. I think there are some interesting points in there, and again, that is some background on Bill Bland. Our next reading is on terrorism, and I'm going to go record that now, so in the meantime, what do you think? Leave a question or comment below. We'll continue the discussion in the comment section as always. Otherwise, thanks for listening, and thanks to the current patrons and Buy Me a Coffee supporters whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen, go to patreon.com/socialismforall or buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. You can sign up for just a few dollars a month or more, or leave a one-time donation. Every donation is encouraging, they're also materially helpful, and they allow me to spend more time on the channel than I'd be able to do without that support. So again, many thanks. This is a non-commercial channel. No sponsorships, no ads, just viewer supported. So we do greatly appreciate that. Beyond that, engagement counts, so like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment, even if it's just thanks or good video. All of that helps to boost this video and the channel, whether it's on YouTube, Patreon, SoundCloud, Spotify, Substack, or wherever else this will be posted in the future. That engagement counts, and it is a way to directly help out. Thanks again, and we will see you in the next video.